It's almost a given that an effective CX strategy includes bringing together people who know and influence all aspects of your business.
So what we do is we're really balanced of like, okay, I've got creative on one side to say, hey, how can we fix this issue? How can we imagine a future for our customers in this area? And then I've got the architects that are like, want to put all the boundaries. So it's a real fun job, for all of us to say like, yeah, I know we've got to have these really formal pieces, but let's play a while.
Building a cross-functional team to implement your CX strategy on this episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
The CX Leader Podcast with Steve Walker is produced by Walker, a business consulting firm that helps our clients unlock the potential of their customer experiences by placing the customer at the heart of all their business decisions. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Walker, the host of the CX Leader Podcast, and thank you for listening. On the CX Leader Podcast, we explore the topics and themes to help leaders like you leverage all the benefits of your customer experience and help your customers and prospects want to do more business with you. In past episodes, we've discussed the importance of having corporate buy-in to your CX strategy. And a key element to reaching that goal is the people with whom you trust to help implement those CX efforts. People who have experience across many areas of the business, a cross-functional support team, if you will. We're going to continue our best practices series by having a discussion with a CX professional that has implemented such a team within his business. Nick Frunzi is the Chief Customer Officer at Esri, a world leader in GIS mapping and spatial analytics software. I know that's a mouthful, and we'll have Nick give you a little more insight into it, but it is a fascinating business. Nick, thanks for being on the CX Leader Podcast.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for having me. It's going to be great to talk to you.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever met in person, but I certainly know you by reputation, and I know you've been a real leader in CXPA, so thank you for being on the podcast and for contributing to our Best Practices series.
Oh, of course. Happy to help Walker, and of course, as a CX professional, happy to help our community.
First things first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about Esri, because I think it's such a fascinating business, and I think that just sets the context a little bit for more what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, we are a 50-year-old this year.
Congrats.
Essentially, some privately held software company. What we really focus on is enabling really B2B or B2G, very often business to government, folks to manage their assets and solve spatial problems. So not simply look at maps, create maps, but really be able to ask questions, and solve business problems, move things forward.
Yeah, without compromising any trade secrets, could you just give us a practical example, maybe a generic example by an industry?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've got stuff like a good example without really talking about any customers is like, so of course you see hurricanes that'll, slam into the southeast portion of the U.S. One of our markets is utilities. And one of our utilities, during one of the hurricanes in the past decade, they basically worked with NOAA, that has all the hurricane data at the federal level, and tracked where is this hurricane going to go? Where are the utilities customers? So in fact, the utility themselves is thinking about their own customers. Where are these people going to lose power? And how can we use the GIS to position our assets so that we're the first in to get our customers back up in power, to get them closer, to getting back to their lives once this hurricane passes through.
Yeah, that's a great example. So you use some AI then, some predictive analytics to try to position those assets, and
yeah. So there's a lot of that's kind of where that analytics piece comes.
Yeah.
You can basically run out models to say, okay, if this happens, what'll be the result here? Change the model. This happens, change the variables. So yeah, it's a really cool field to be in, and we just get to see our customers just do wonderful things both for businesses and citizens and their employees and stuff.
Yeah, so you actually sell to the governments, big utilities, the super big businesses.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And NGOs, the insurance field, banking,
big developers.
Yeah. Anything.
Okay.
Again, anywhere that really has to deal with that type of stuff, they use our technology.
Well, it is a fascinating business. We were talking a little bit offline before we went on the program, but I just think it's really cool. It's amazing what you can do. And you've been with them for a long time, haven't you?
Oh, yes. For anyone who has seen me in the field, in our CX field, I will often say I started here when I had hair, because I don't have hair anymore. Yeah, I have been here. It will be 29 years I will have been here.
Well, I guess 29 years ago, you probably weren't called a CX professional, right?
Oh, no. I got hired here as an instructor, actually.
Okay. Yeah, so you came in kind of through the training,
Yep.
people development process?
Yeah, so basically for our customers.
Yeah, so just tell us a little bit about your career, in short strokes, broad strokes, and how you emerged into the CX role.
Yeah, so basically I came in, as an instructor. So, my first job really here was in a customer facing role. Did some work on some, basically workbook material, written material books, and then worked in an area around, basically started entering the call center. So we'd had a call center. In 2012, 2013, we were going to undergo, like many companies have, digital transformation. And we had a small consulting firm in to talk to us about what it would be needed. And they were spunky and kind of went, hey, we're really not going to work with you unless you have a chief customer officer, because this stuff is going to flounder unless you're thinking about your customers. And I jokingly say that I was the person that didn't push my chair back from the table fast enough. But it also made sense from my role in the room. That I had so much of a customer-facing organization. And then also, without hubris, the relationships I had with my fellow executives.
Yeah.
So that I think our owner also thought like, hey, the CX thing is kind of cross-functional. This is probably the best person we've got at an executive level.
Well, one of the things I say a lot, and one of the reasons we started this podcast, is that it's a great time to be a CX professional.
Oh, yeah.
Well, your discussion about kind of why you were picked for the role is a great lead into what we were going to talk about with the best practices, which you have built a really impressive cross-functional approach to how you run your program. And maybe you could just describe that for our guests a little bit, and then we'll go into some more detail about the specifics.
Yeah. So what we did when we were really going to reboot this piece last year was, say, okay, we're gonna get. I used to be in many people in CXPA in the field, CX team of one. So I've been the CCO, but I'm marshaling resources and doing things, and nobody worked for me directly in this field. At the end of last year, we decided we are going to put dedicated headcount into this area. And then what we did there was, okay, we're going to do things a little differently now, because we're going to have real people to do real jobs full time. And we looked at, okay, how do we organize working with everybody else? Because I didn't want to create yet another silo. I think that's the danger sometimes in our field. So what we did was basically looked at, our customer life cycle. We have 5 stages in ours, and logically, who should own each stage? So I think a lot of people think, oh, cool, well, the customer experience organization should own the life cycle. And what we had decided was like, no, actually, we're going to slice this up a bit. So of a 5-stage life cycle, from a line management perspective, let's say, I only own 2 stages. So some case I'd say I purposely gave them away to other pieces of the org because they've got the expertise in that space. And we didn't just give them away and say, go take a walk. We gave them away and say, well, yeah, you're going to own this stage, and let's talk about what that means.
Can you share the 5 cycles?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've got basically, we've got a discover, and that is owned by our marketing division. And primarily that discover is digital, but not completely. Then you've got a consider stage, which is really owned by our product marketing folks. And in this case, the way Esri structured product marketing is actually separate than marketing itself. So it's a different portion of the business. Then after consider, you've got buy, which, as you could guess, we gave to sales. Then, we have your traditional, which is use. And then you've got advocate. And those 2 pieces are owned by my org.
It's a very elegant design.
Yeah, we actually had 6 at one point. We had, after that buy and before the use, we had a get me up and running piece, which is going to come from, again, from an outside in, inside out, that's adoption. But what we really talked about as this cross-functional team was like, now it's just part of use. We can actually make things a little simpler, so let's tighten up the model. Because back in 2013 or so, we had actually built this six-stage life cycle.
Right. So when you started putting the cross-functional team together, what was your criteria, or what were you looking for when you went out to find some of these owners and advocates?
That is probably the most critical question. Really looking for a combination of leaders in organizations, and not necessarily by headcount, but by, so I've got my fellow executives, the CMO and the head of global sales and different bits, head of product management, head of development. Who on those teams, can I have? So number one, I'm asking my peers, who can I have? And then what I'm getting is someone who they respect and are going to listen to, who also knows their business and knows, most importantly, the customer and cares about the customer. And that's really the way we went after it. Is what we're finding is in many cases, some ways I have a problem of riches, because culturally, everybody here wants to make the customer successful. So it isn't like we have an organization where I had to find people who want to help the customer. For me, it was more, okay, are you the right person? Do you get a strategic picture? Do you have the buy-in of your executive? Do you have the buy-in across the organization? Are you someone that people throughout Esri want to work with you? So it was kind of that, in some ways, one of those just goes into the, there's many books on how to, best practices to build a team, kind of some of those principles.
My guest on the podcast this week is Nick Frunzi. He's the Chief Customer Officer at Esri, a world leader in GIS, which for those of you who don't recognize that's Geographic Information Systems, and spatial analytics software. We are having a fascinating discussion in this topic around best practices, and Nick and his organization have put together best practices as it relates to developing a cross-functional team. So, Nick, now that you've got your team recruited, what aspects do you delegate to them versus what is kind of more, process or more dictated by your function? I mean, how much creativity do they have in these stages?
Oh, we give them tons.
Yeah.
What I try to do is we say, what we're trying to do kind of governance-wise, is give people guardrails.
Yep.
And knowing that I'd really like you to bounce off them. In fact, it's been an interesting context, because part of what we have is I've got a really great relationship, on the CX side, also with our CIO. So on the cross-functional team, I've actually got two architects, and architects, of course, God bless them all, want to dive into we got business process, we want to process diagrams, and they want to go completely and we need that to execute. So what we do is we really balance of okay, I've got creative on one side to say, hey, how can we fix this issue? How can we imagine a future for our customers in this area? And then I've got the architects that are want to put up all the boundaries. So it's a real fun job, for all of us to say I know we've got to have these really formal pieces, but let's play a while before we get real. Especially because I've got people from the different pieces of the organization. They've got ideas how their business unit can better serve our customers. They don't need all of us to tell them.
Yeah.
But it's great because you'll have people say who are in the, responsible for Discover, they're going to comment on use. So I haven't set up these internal barriers. Just because you're doing Discover means you can't talk about anything else. It's no, you should all comment on the entire life cycle, but there's specific necks to grab to make sure things get done.
Yeah, I was going to ask you sort of how they work together, because, in my mind, as you're starting to get some customer feedback that, maybe could be put into product design, for example.
Yep.
That maybe that feedback's not going to come till they actually use the product. So Is that a good example? Are there other examples where you've?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean that's a great example. And we, what we do own, specifically in my team, one of the things we own, besides those two stages, is we took over surveying.
Perfect.
So surveying at Esri was run by marketing. And again, when we started to spin this up as an org, talking with our CMO, she's like, "Yep, absolutely. Like you guys should manage this and handle this." And the advantage Esri has, we're not a heavy survey company. Like, so we talk to our customers a lot, but it wasn't like, oh, by the way, we're, like many things that happen in our field. We're like, oh, surveys are just going to solve the problem, and then you over survey the heck out of your customers. They survey fatigue. We didn't have that, so it's actually been kind of nice to say, okay, we've got these surveys, we're getting feedback. How do we amplify what we're getting, and how do we basically put process and vision around that, so that it really works? Because we had surveys previously more directly for product, like you asked. And what we found when we moved into it was the product folks were like, well, yeah, the questions that were on the survey, we didn't care about. And it's like, well, then why would I ask our customers something you don't care? Like we have other things we really do care about that we want to know from our customers, but the surveys that were being put out didn't answer the questions for us.
I know you said you don't rely on surveying exclusively, but there's lots of effort that goes into understanding the customer. Do you try to use the database or the technology to retain all that, or is it pretty free form?
It's pretty free form. That's actually one of the things we're looking at now that we've spun up the org, to say, okay, we've got, we've done listening post inventory, so I know where things are coming in, and we know the discrete pieces of data, and I obviously tie them back to customers. But what we are looking at is like, okay, like how can I now get this, especially since we're a software company, how can I get this into a database and get this into systems that are, easily accessible, and then I can run, do analytics on and all the other bits. That's why I kind of chuckle in the field, because obviously AI is new to a lot of folks, and there's a lot of AI and CX that bounces around, and to some extent, I was like, oh, I'm just waiting to get all the CX data to get. We have data scientists on staff. It's what we do.
Right.
And they're kind of chuckling like, oh, we can like do stuff on our own data. I'm like, yeah, I'll be coming to you. You'll get to play around with our own customers and see what the data tells you.
Hey, just a kind of an interesting juxtaposition of your, because this is a best practice, and we advise all our clients that, customer experience has to be pervasive throughout the organization. Ultimately, you have to have some sort of cross-functional approach to it. I would say you've been probably more benevolent in handing out some of that responsibility, but are there any downsides or any pitfalls that you've found with your approach?
There's pitfalls to this approach that I fortunately have not experienced. Like I know, and I won't name any names, I know there's at least another organization that went this route. Like, oh, hey, I'm going to give this thing out. That's how I'm going to get cross-function. I'm going to spread responsibility across. And then what happened was, like, that was all good. And then suddenly those other organizations went like, those KPIs you're talking about, we don't really want to work with those. And this person didn't have any authority except to go to a board to try to like, well, hey, you wanted me to do this, and now these guys are taking their toys and going. I mean, so it can be, if you don't have, essentially you get to the point of this isn't our term, but we use this term. I should actually know the source of it because I use it not infrequently. Is that the idea of collaboration happens at the speed of trust, is what we talk about. So I haven't had that problem because we've got the trust among the executive team. So that we know, like, okay, I can ask for these things and we're aligned, and you're not going to suddenly run off, and do something else with it. Where I have seen kind of the issues with this is that, especially the other people that are involved, everybody has a full-time, day job. So, CX can kind of wander a little bit in some of these stages that we've got to kind of herd cats.
Yep.
Kind of like come back. But how we do that is, we've got strategic projects that we're responsible for. And, those folks are responsible to report out on them every month. So they can't wander too far. But it is, there is that kind of yin yang. Well, you don't own the resources. So how do you get the work done?
Yeah, I love your quote that collaboration happens at the speed of trust. And that again has been another theme that we've seen throughout the podcast is that CX leaders need to be cross-functional. They have to be collaborative leaders. And yet, as you suggest, unless there's really good cultural strength there around that, or there is really good top-down support for it, it kind of becomes the flavor of the month. And, everybody keeps waiting for this fad to go away.
Yes.
And one of my jokes on this is, we call it customer experience, but you cannot have a successful business if you are not taking care of customers.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's funny because we have some of our customers and I look at them and I go, oh yeah, those guys are on the bottom of the CX index. And I'm like, well, hopefully maybe they'll use our product to help their customers a little more. So yeah, it's like, how do you do experience, without the customer? We can't be successful.
All right, Nick, you've reached the pinnacle of the podcast where we ask for your take-home value, and I think specifically around professionals that are out there and saying, hey, my cross-functional team is not what I need it to be. It isn't what Nick's talking about here today. What's your best tip for the CX pros out there in terms of creating the kind of cross-functional team that you have?
I think the best single thing I could recommend is that, well, it's two things, sorry. It's you need to empower people. So, and that goes in two ways. One of which is you need to bring CX to them and understand their goals, their needs, what they're trying to accomplish, and basically saying, how can I help you? So instead of gimme, which is actually what we are trying to do, you're bringing, how can I help you meet your goals through CX? The other piece of empowerment is that if you've got these people in these cross-functional roles, not the executives who are doing the work, it really is our role to provide air cover. So when things go sideways and they're going to get beat up on something, we have to step in to defend them, to maybe even take the incoming fire from them, and not just kind of hang them out to dry saying, great, you're on the team, knock yourself out. Good luck with that. You don't work for me. I hope that works out. Those two things, I think, are the most critical bits.
Yeah, I really like part two. That really kind of hits me as just a leader of a small business. Sometimes when you go out there and you're super critical, it doesn't have the right impact. So providing that air cover or making it safe for everybody to say, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers, or, maybe this is something that, we really need to take a look at. I think that's an awesome tip. So thank you.
And actually also what you just added to that is I think, you really nailed it there, Steve. It's the safety piece.
Yeah.
Like that to me, if people can feel safe that I can share my opinion, I can share the customer's words, and no one's going to kill the messenger.
Yeah. That's how you build trust, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Nick Frunzi has been my guest on the podcast this week, and if you are a CX pro, he has given you a gold mine of how to create a better cross-functional approach for your program and really ensure the buy-in and making sure that you're getting the impact that your efforts deserve within your organization. Nick's the Chief Customer Officer at Esri, which is a fascinating company. I encourage you to check out their website. It's a really cool company. They're a world leader in GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems, and spatial analytics software. Nick, thanks again for sharing your story and being a contributor to the CX Leader podcast. I hope this won't be the last time you'll be on it. And just in case any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, could you give us like your LinkedIn profile or some way that they might be able to connect with you?
Yeah, Steve. I mean, it has been great chatting with you. I really, really enjoyed it, and happy to come back. Happy to help the community. It's what we do. I think it's the nature of customer experience. We need to help each other all in what we're doing. Yeah, anyone was interested in this, you think you want to talk a little further, easiest way to find me is just on LinkedIn. Straightforward. Nick Frunzi. I'm at Esri. If you do that search, you should have no problem finding me, and would love to connect and help you with your CX programs, as well as learn about what you're doing to help Esri be a better company.
Yeah.
So thanks so much.
Well, again, great to have you on the program, and they probably could catch you at a CXPA annual meeting too, right?
Oh yes, I'm always at that.
Okay.
So
they're a great partner for everybody in the industry. Well, if you want to learn anything more about what you heard on this episode or any of the previous episodes, or about how Walker might be able to help your business, feel free to contact me at steve.walker@walkerinformation.com or call me here in the U.S. That's +1 317-843-8890. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you and talk to you more. Don't forget to subscribe to the CX Leader podcast. You can go to walkerinfo.com/podcasts and you'll find links to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and now we're on our own YouTube channel as well. Simply go to walkerinfo.tv to listen. And if you haven't heard, Walker was named Qualtrics' 2019 CX Partner of the Year. You can learn more about that by going to walkerinfo.com/x4. Thank you for listening to the CX Leader podcast, which is a production of Walker. We're a business consulting firm that can help you make customer experience your biggest competitive advantage. Find out more at walkerinfo.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.